Hello there everybody, Sam's Trains here, welcome back to the railway. Okay, I've done something crazy, but it might just open up a whole new avenue for me and this channel. I have always been fascinated by 3D printing. I've always been amazed by what you can create with a 3D printer, but I've always been quite frightened of giving it a try. I've always wondered, is it going to be too difficult for me to master? And many a time I've Googled, is it difficult to get started 3D printing? And a lot of the time on the various forums and stuff, the answer is yes. So I've never done it. However, recently I reached 100,000 subscribers. Thank you so much for that. And I decided to treat myself. So I've done it. I've actually bought a 3D printer. I did my research and I picked up this. It is the FlashForge Adventurer 3. And I've had it for about a week, and so far I do not regret it. So this is a sort of mid to low range printer. There are much better 3D printers out there, but there are much worse ones as well. I tried to get the best one I could afford, and I did quite a lot of research to choose this one. I looked at quite a lot of reviews of all things, and this printer did have glowing reviews, which is good. And there are a number of different reasons why I picked this one. First of all, it has a heated bed. The bed itself that you print onto can heat up, and apparently that's quite good for stopping warping of different prints. And I just thought, because if I'm doing models, if I'm going to be making wagons, or dare I say it, even locomotives one day, it's probably a good idea not to have them warping. So I did go with one that had a heated bed. I also picked this one because it has an enclosure around it, and again, apparently that's quite good for maintaining temperature. And also I just thought an enclosure is going to stop dust getting in. That should help everything to stay clean, and hopefully all of the mechanisms and everything will last a little bit longer. So like I say, I've had this printer for just over a week, something like 9 days, something like that. Back when it first arrived, it was super easy to set up. I plugged this thing in, switched it on. It was printing within 10 minutes. It has this little sort of cubey program built into it. It just creates a cube, and that shows you that the printer is working properly. And let me tell you, seeing this robot just burst into life and produce something right in front of my very eyes, it blew my mind, literally. I guess, I don't know if I've been playing with trains for too long or something, but yeah, it was absolutely amazing. And this little cube, basically, well, it's not a cube, it's a square thing, to use a technical term. This got me wondering, what can I do with this 3D printer? I've got it, it works. That was all I was thinking about, to be honest. But once this cube was born, I just thought I want to design something. So I went in search for a design software, a CAD software is what they call it, and I found this one. This is called SketchUp. It is a very basic software, but they do say it's good for beginners, and it was very easy to use, and more importantly, it was free. So I got started straight away. Within an hour, I was up and designing. It surprised me how easy this was. So I didn't build a locomotive or a wagon because I thought that would be insane. So instead, I designed this. It's just a little part box. I didn't really give myself too much of a brief for this. I just thought, let's say when I take apart a locomotive, it might be quite nice to have somewhere to put the screws. So I want a shallow container with several little compartments in it that I can put screws and little parts in while I'm dismantling and servicing a locomotive. So I designed this thing, I put some compartments in, I put in all the measurements I wanted. It was amazing the level of control I had over this. I mean, it's a container for screws, and yet it was incredibly exciting. So I designed it to my exact specification. I loaded it onto a USB stick, bunged it into the printer, and it took about 4 hours, something like that. And it was created. And look at this, it's clean, it's come out properly, it's come out exactly as I designed it. It's strong, it's really strong. I probably didn't need to make the walls as thick as they are, but that's good. And I also had some magnets lying around just up here in the loft, and I thought maybe I could make a lid that's held onto this with magnets. So into the design for the box, I included little slots, and would you believe it, the magnets fit perfectly into the slots. I was expecting to have to glue them. I haven't glued them, they've slotted in and they're staying there, which is great. And then I designed the lid for the container. Now the lid did come out properly, as you can see. Here's the lid. Again, the magnets fitted into it properly, but it was a little bit tight. I didn't make much of a clearance between the box and the lid. It's a bit looser now than it was when I made it, but yeah, when I first made it, it was very difficult to get this on or off. But you know what? That was learning. I learnt right there and then that parts that fit together need to be just a fraction of a millimetre different to each other to get a nice loose fit. And of course there are different types of fit. This is all stuff I've been learning. You can make stuff fit together really tightly like this by getting the distances closer, or if you want it to be a more convenient, user-friendly fit, you leave half a millimetre or something. So this is just a basic screw box. However, I learned so much about 3D printing just in the couple of hours I spent with this. Oh, it's a lot of fun. Okay, let's move on. I'll show you what I did next. Right, so that was my tutorial, if you like. I was on day 2, day 3, something like that, and I decided the time had come to start designing a wagon. I know that sounds insane, but I just wanted to do something basic. So I knocked this together in SketchUp. It's a very, very simple model. There's no detail on it whatsoever. I did put some planking onto the sides just to try that out, see if it would work. And I did include some little sort of inset holes into the bottom so that I would have a way to hopefully fit this onto a chassis later on. And right in front of my very eyes, the body printed without any issues at all, and it produced this. Now, yeah, it's very, very basic. It could do with some detail, and the interior isn't very good. However, it looks like a 3-plank wagon, doesn't it? I guess, sort of. It is red, which is not very realistic, obviously, but yeah, I mean, the dimensions are right, it printed okay. I thought, this is a wagon body, so let's have a go at designing a chassis. Now, this is where it got complicated because you can't just knock a chassis together and expect it to work. So I started looking at the chassis I had in my collection. I looked at how they worked on a level that I've not really delved into before, sort of the axles and the distance between the axle boxes in relation to the wheel sets. I looked at the couplings, the positioning of the NEM couplings. Yeah, I did quite a lot of just looking and measuring of different chassis until I had a decent picture in my head of what needed to be done to create, don't get me wrong, a very, very, very basic chassis for my very, very basic body. So I went into SketchUp yet again and I produced this. Now I actually did this in quarters. So I literally created 1/4 of the chassis. I divided everything by 2 and I created one axle box and a little bit of detail that goes around it, as you can see, just a bit of a spring or something. And then I duplicated that piece in software 3 times, flipped it and just connected it all together, and I had a full wagon chassis. And look at that. I mean, overall, I'm quite pleased with the way this looks, to say it was thrown together in sort of 45 minutes or something like that. So when I was happy with the design and I'd sort of double and triple checked all of the measurements, I went to the printer and got it started, and the printer produced this. Now again, there's nothing special about this, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to be selling these in their millions or indeed at all, but it looks like a wagon chassis, doesn't it? And there's quite a few little features that I'm quite proud of. First of all, I created these little sort of cylinders, and these fit into holes in the top of the chassis, which do match up with holes, well, the holes that I made in the bottom of the wagon. And this was an early prototype, so I needed to change the sizes and such. But as you can see, those cylinders do center the wagon onto the chassis to make sure it's held in the right place, and then you can glue it on if you want to, although I haven't, because it's quite nice to be able to exchange them. I even made little holes in the end of the chassis into which you can fit triangle buffers, as you can see. I measured the shaft of a triangle buffer, made the holes accordingly, and as you can see, you can fit the buffers into those holes, which was quite exciting when I tried that for the first time. And sure enough, the AliExpress wheels that I chose to use for this wagon, they did fit. They were a tight fit, difficult to get them in because the plastic is quite strong. It's actually really quite rigid, but I did manage to get them in, and it made quite a free rolling chassis, which again was really quite impressive to me. And more or less that brings us to the present tense, because everything I've done so far is quite basic and quite primitive. I'm very pleased with it and I've really, really enjoyed learning about it, but I want to sort of up the level a little bit now. I want to start adding a bit more detail. I want to improve on the design a little bit and see where it takes me. So I've actually already done some upgrades to the chassis itself. As you can see, I've added a little bit more detail to the underframe. The design now has NEM pockets installed, which I'm very, very excited about. So we'll see if a NEM coupling fits into the slot that I've made. Hopefully it will do. And look at this, I've even created my own take of the NEM coupling. Now, it is based on a sort of standard NEM coupling, but I've had to adapt the design just a little bit so that it 3D prints better and the moving parts are free to move. I don't know how decent these couplings are. If they work better than on the Dapol egg vans, then I guess that will be a victory. And look at this, I've also made my own design of buffer. I'll be really interested to see how this prints, because they're very fine pieces. I'm not sure how the 3D printer is going to handle printing such tiny parts, but I want to try all of this out. So first things first, I'm going to print the more advanced version of my chassis, which has the extra detail and the NEM couplings, and we'll see how that goes. Right, let's go for a chassis then. The final build of chassis. Okay, so we're just going to go with the standard chassis. Okay, I think it's going. Here we go. And she's off. Right, fingers crossed then, and hopefully all the detail comes out all right. Okay, looks like it's finished. Oh, it's a chassis. Right, come on. I think we have a final chassis. It's a bit awkward to get this out. I still can't get over this. Right, I can hit a button on a machine and it can build whatever it is that I can dream up. You know, as long as you can imagine it and figure out a way to sort of draw it on the computer, you can just create it. This is crazy. Here we go. Oh, it's a chassis. And just before I started to film this video, I printed a tray of 12 NEM couplings, and I don't know why, but I'm actually more excited about this than anything else. Look at these now. I mean, they're not perfect if you look up close. However, they do seem to be fit for purpose. The coupling hook fitted onto the little shaft that I made for it, and look, I can't believe this. I mean, I didn't really put that much thought into the design, but the hook is staying put, the hook moves freely, and if I compare this with a standard NEM coupling from a proper made wagon or something, from any sort of distance, you actually can't tell very much difference between the two. And like seriously, I designed this in half an hour, so I'm amazed with the way that turned out. So hopefully these are going to fit into the chassis, and I'll try that in just a second. Let's try printing some buffers then. This should be very interesting. All I need to do is bam, and the buffers are coming. Okay, I've got the buffers. Now there was a bit of sort of like fluff on them when they were first made, but I've not used any tools on them actually. I just used my fingers and my nails and just sort of rubbed them, caressed them, if you will. And all of the fluff has come off, and they're not sort of industrial standard buffers, are they? They don't look as good as you might get from Hornby or Bachmann when they're properly sort of cast in metal or something. So they're cheap plastic buffers. If I saw them on a model, I would complain. But, you know, just for personal use, just for a bit of fun, I'm rather pleased with those. And I guess this has taught me that there is actually quite a lot of design and such that goes into even such a small thing as a buffer. And yeah, I couldn't resist getting a little bit arty-farty with this and adding in a little bit of detail to the shaft, just because you can. That's what you can do in 3D printing. So I've got the couplings, I've got the buffers, I've got the chassis, I've got some wheels. Let's put it all together and see how it all works. So I think these are all of the different parts I need. I've got the chassis 3D printed, I've got 4 buffers, I've got the NEM couplings, which I've already put the hooks onto, I have the axles from AliExpress, and the little cylinders that will attach the body, or a body. Okay, so I think I'll put the wheels in first, because this is the part I enjoy the least, and they are annoying me at the moment because they keep trying to run away. So yeah, I mean, this is not quite as easy to do as it is on, say, a Hornby wagon or something, but with a bit of force, they go in. Let's put the other one in as well. Okay, and they are really nice and free to turn, which is great. I think next I will put the buffers in, and I might need some super glue for these actually, because I did make the fit nice and loose, but I'll just pop them in for now, I suppose. There we go. Got that in. These are looking pretty good in there. Okay, buffers, NEM couplings. Are these going to fit? This is the scary part, so let's just try and put it in the normal way. Wow. Oh, that buffer's on the way out. I will glue those in. Oh, that was easy. That actually went in just like a real NEM coupling. Will the other one do the same? Just push that in. There we go. Wow. I have put quite a lot of spring on those couplings, so I didn't know whether they would fit, but they did. And look at that. We've got the nice loose hooks. Okay. Now, I just need these cylinders to go in, and these are awkward to fit historically, but if I pop that in there and then pop it down, yeah, that's gone in. Second one, let's do the same again. Pop that in there, and then push it in there. That one buffer keeps coming out. Okay folks, here it is. This is the complete chassis. It's got the NEM couplings on it, as you can see. It's got the Sam's Trains buffers on board. It's got proper sort of buffer beams now, as you can see, rather than just an entirely uniform block for the wagon body to sit on. Right, there's a bit of a problem though, because now the body that I made right at the start is absolutely useless. It doesn't fit onto the nubs anymore because I've made them bigger so that they can hold the wagon a little bit better. And obviously the level of detail on this body doesn't match the level of detail on the chassis. Even given how basic the chassis is, the wagon is quite obviously way more basic. So it is time to design a more detailed body with a few nicer features, a bit of a better finish. I'm going to do this in white as well so that it can be painted, and I'm going to film myself doing it. So let's get on to SketchUp and let's see what I can produce. So I'm going to apply something I learnt when I was designing the chassis for this design, and that is to cut the wagon body into quarters, because it cuts the work down by 4. I only have to design a quarter of the wagon, and because it's going to be symmetrical on both horizontal axes, it doesn't matter. I can just duplicate them and flip them and such, and it should work together. Now with the original wagon body I produced, the planking wasn't very pronounced. You couldn't really see the planks very well, so I'm going to make the gaps between the planks a little bit larger, probably larger than life actually, so this is going to be less realistic, but it should make the planking stand out a little bit more on the model, which again is a sort of compromise that I assume the proper manufacturers will have to consider. You know, you're going to make things a little bit less realistic sometimes, but they will look better in the long run, or that's the hope anyway. As you can see, I'm also putting some more detail onto the sides as well. I'm putting the sort of framework on, which all stands out a little bit, so I'm hoping this will actually look really cool when it's printed, and I'm hoping this will add a little bit more depth to the wagon. You know, if you've got little bits sticking out, it'll look a little bit less like a box with lines on it and a little bit more like a miniature wagon or something. Well, that's the goal anyway. I'm also doing something special on the interior as well. As you can see, I am going to start putting planking on the inside. I did actually experiment with this with the original body that I made, but it was coming up with errors and such. So I'm going to do it slightly differently this time. I'm putting the planks on the inside, but then for the base of the wagon, I'm creating a separate piece with all the planking effect on it, and then I'm just going to stick that onto the bottom of the wagon. In fact, it's ready to do now. So if I try and move this to the base of the wagon, oh yeah, you can see actually that's matched up perfectly. It's great because you can put all your custom measurements in, and then everything just fits as it should. It's not like real life where you might cut something wrong or make a slight error in one of your measurements. No, it's kind of impossible to do that. As long as you get the figures right, it all works. So here it is. This is now a quarter of a slightly more detailed wagon body. And this looks good, doesn't it? This is actually not bad. So now it's just a case of duplicating this 3 times and flipping the various quarters, and then putting them together, as you can see. And this is the finished product. Take a look at that. I really enjoyed creating that. And of course, it does also need the little holes in the base, which I've also put in as well. So hopefully that will now fit onto the wagon. Well, it's printed, and I've been evil. I've not showed you the printing process, but I've got it in my hand. Are you ready to see it? Oh, this is awesome. I am so happy with this. Ready? Here it is. Look at this. I mean, I don't want to flatter myself, because this is obviously not the standard of Hornby or Dapol or anybody else. But I don't know, 20 years ago, if I saw this in a factory, I'd think, yeah, that's going to turn into quite a nice wagon when it's been decorated. So the planking is much more obvious now. I suppose the fact that I've printed this in a white PLA makes this a little bit more obvious. You've clearly got the supports on the sides, and they're slightly larger sort of blocks on the end. And then inside, this is the part I'm happiest about, you've got the proper planking on the inside, and that looks professional, doesn't it? I mean, that really does look good. I don't want to take too much credit for that because a lot of the texture is just by nature of the 3D printer. This sort of wood texture that it's got, I did not put on there. I don't know quite how that's happened, but I'm not going to try and get rid of it because it looks great. Then we've got the little sort of circles on the bottom, which will hopefully match up with the cylinders that I've already put into the wagon here. So, are you ready? Let's pop the body on. And as you can see, because I designed this body for this version of the chassis, it actually fits on perfectly. Look at that. Now, again, if I wanted to glue this on, I could do. However, if I can take the body off like this and put it on and it stays on without, you know, I can shake it around and it doesn't come off, that might be quite handy. Maybe I could create different bodies to fit on this chassis. And this is where good old Callum Wilcox comes in, because I was showing him a few pictures of what I've been creating, and I told him that I'm quite interested in creating some different bodies, maybe a box van, maybe a tanker or something, and he was actually good enough to find me some photos. I told him that I'd created a really short chassis and I'd love to try and create a little cute box van to put on top of it. And he sent me this photograph. This is an S&DJR box van. I mean, what else is it going to be? It's Callum Wilcox. He loves the S&DJR. But I thought, yes, this is a real challenge. It's quite short, so it might look all right on my little short chassis. But there's a lot of detail on there in terms of the framework and the planking and the supports and the roof. This is a real step up from the Wagon, and it's probably just what I need sort of to learn and advance my skills a little bit. So I'm going to try to create one of these bodies, and I'm going to bring you along on the process. I really don't know whether this is going to work out. Something in me doubts it because, you know, a box van is much more complicated than a wagon, which is basically just a box. I don't know. But if I fail, I will fail on camera and you guys will see it. So let's create a box van. Right, so I'm not going to create this one in quarters, I've decided, because I want to sort of see how it's looking as I go, and it's quite difficult to get a sense of that, I found, in quarters. So I'm going to do it in half this time. So I'm just going to half the long edge, and then we'll just duplicate it and flip it once. So it's a bit of a slow start because I wanted to make sure all of the dimensions were right and that it was going to actually fit on my chassis when it was done, because if it didn't fit, that would be soul destroying. And then I got to work splitting the wagon up into sections. Obviously, if you look at the picture, the wagon is split into three, sort of. You've got the door in the middle and then just the sort of support structure and the planking on the left and right. So I'm doing this first, really, before the design gets too complicated. As you can see, I'm putting the planking in. I don't think I've got a very efficient methodology for doing this. It is a little bit slow and a little bit fiddly. However, it does work. This is what I did, obviously, with the open wagon. A lot more planks to do on this body, but hey, if it works, it works. So now all those are in, they're just lines at the moment, they don't exist physically or anything. I'm going to start putting in some of the detail. So obviously a prominent feature of the actual box van is that X-shaped structure on both sides. So I'm putting these in now, as you can see. I'm not taking any specific measurements or anything because I'm having to scale this wagon slightly to fit on my chassis. So don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to be realistic or accurate with this. I'm certainly never going to try and sell this or, you know, just pretend that it's an accurate S&DJR wagon. It's just a nice looking body for my chassis and it's a good bit of practice. Anyway, now you're looking at me putting the doors onto the side, plus a little bit of detailing here and there. And now that the side is finished and looking all right, I've got the really, really satisfying part, and that is, of course, pushing and pulling the various parts that I've drawn in order to make them stand out or sort of set into the body of the wagon. And I've used knowledge from the open wagon to sort of know how much to do this. I've figured out what looks good and what doesn't. Again, the dimensions I'm using are almost certainly not realistic, but using slightly larger values like this does make the final product look a bit more realistic, in my opinion, anyway. But that's the beauty of it. I'm making this for me, so only I have to like it, I suppose. And then finally, I'm adding just a little bit more detail. I'm sticking some hinges and handles on the doors. I'm not really putting any detail into those, but hopefully the fact that they stand out will look quite decent. And as you can see, I'm adding some bracing to those X-shaped supports. I might do some more of that later on once I've seen how it prints, but for now I don't want to put too much time into the minor details like that, in case it doesn't work. And this is what it looks like at the 1 hour point. This is 1 hour's work, that's all. That's crazy how quickly you can do this. So I'm now moving on to the ends, which are thankfully a little bit simpler on this. So it's just the same again really with the planking, a little bit of detailing. And now of course I have half a wagon minus the roof. So it's the big moment to duplicate it now and flip it, and then I'm going to try and sandwich it onto the first half. And would you look at that, it's actually worked. I'm really, really pleased already with the way that looks. Whether it will print or not is another matter, but purely from a design point of view, I'm really pleased with this. Now I'm a bit scared about doing the roof. I am going to make this one piece. It's not going to be a separately fitted roof because then there's a design challenge of making the thing fit. So I think I've figured out what I'm going to do here. I'm actually going to make the roof separately, as you can see, and I've taken plenty of measurements first of all because I want there to be a lip around the top of the body so that the roof has got a little bit of an overhang rather than the roof just sort of perching on top and looking a bit silly. So then I'm putting like an arc at one end of the roof piece that I've created, and then it's just a case of pulling that arc across the body. So I think this is a roof, and in theory it should fit onto the wagon. So if I move this over and stick it on, it's quite awkward actually getting these to line up properly, but I think that's on, and look at the state of that. I'm really, really happy with the way that looks. Anyway, let's bung that into the 3D printer and see what it makes of it, shall I? Okay, I think it's finished. Oh, that looks absolutely great, doesn't it? Wow. Well, I'll have to let it cool for a second and then we'll pull it off there, see what it's like. Look at this. That's actually all right, isn't it? It's crazy. Right, you ready? Okay, ready? It's off. Oh my God, watching my creation being born right in front of me there was incredible. Right, well, I couldn't be happier with this, quite honestly. Look at the state of it. Imagine how this would look if it was painted. I mean, again, it's very, very basic. We've got a bit of triangle standards going on here, but you know, this thing took like 2 hours for me to design. This is not something that I put hours and hours of thought into. It was just a practice project, and seeing how half decent this actually looks makes me really excited for what I might be able to do if I actually, you know, put days of thought into the design and actually really figured out some better techniques for detail. It's just proving really that this is a viable way forward, isn't it? Anyway, really, really happy with that body. It's quite heavy as well. I do like heavy models. I decided that I would infill this, so there's a 15% infill. As you could see that when it was being created, there's like a honeycomb structure inside. That's quite good. It's got some decent weight to it. So yeah, we'll see how that performs. Right. Let's have the moment of truth then. So I have my chassis with the old body on it. The old body is not stuck down, so I can just get rid of that. And in theory, this new body with its holes in the bottom should match this wagon. I've done so much messing about with this body. Is it actually going to fit? I'm scared. I'm terrified of this. Right, embarrassment commence when it doesn't fit. You ready? Oh, it literally does as well. Oh, look at that. There we go. And it's pretty, you know, stable on there. I can really tilt it left, tilt it right. It's not going to come off on the track. It's a really nice fit, but I can pull it off and stick the wagon body on if I want. And that to me is awesome. That's the kind of thing I enjoy. Of course though, because they're such a good fit, a little dab of glue and I could make either one of these bodies permanent. Wow, wow. So, I mean, we've got lots to do now, haven't I? I need to find out what these look like with a bit of decoration on them. I'm terrible at that. And obviously the big thing is to get these wagons, I've created another chassis for this one. I'm going to get them onto the track, hook up a locomotive with them and see if they actually get around the track. One thing I'll be really interested to see is how my dodgy, awful couplings handle themselves. Are they going to couple right? The coupling hooks are quite loose on this, so that's something to address with a future revision. But, I mean, there are professionally produced wagons that derail horribly on my layout. I'm thinking of those egg vans. Have I done any better with my, throw together project? If so, I'll be absolutely impressed, and no doubt it will be beginner's luck. But I should say, because Callum Wilcox was good enough to figure out what sort of wagon body I should create, I have made one of these bodies for him and I've sent it off to him, as well as one of the older designs of wagon body, and he's got a chassis as well. So if he decides to, and I'm not sure that he will, but if he decides to paint this up and make it look decent, it might be worth checking out his channel in the future just to see whether he's done that or not, because I'd love to see what this looks like with some more sort of painted detail on it and such. But come on, let's not procrastinate. Let's get this onto the track and see if it's actually going to work. So here is my little test setup then. I've decided to put my wagons in the middle of a train to simulate a real life situation. So there's going to be tension across the two wagons and every coupling is going to be tested this way. So I have the Bachmann USA dock tank, a couple of Southern vans, and then a little bit further down the track I've got 3 more vans. And then I've got, of course, my 2 wagons right here, which are going to go onto the track for the first time. I will warn you, they have pretty floppy coupling hooks. So that's something I'm going to have to work on. So we might definitely get some Helgen style couplings going on here. Yeah, basically I was so hell-bent on making the coupling hooks loose enough so that they drop down when you let them go. I've made them too floppy. But again, I just need to make a slightly narrower channel for those coupling hooks to run through, and Bob's your uncle, they shouldn't flap so much. But look at this, 3D printed bearings, and they're running nice and free like that. Let's try this one. Look at that, not bad, not bad. Not as good as like a proper metal bearing or I suppose an injection molded bearing, which is smoother, but you know what, I'll take it, I'll take it. Right, are the coupling hooks okay? Let's make sure they're nice and straight and let's push them together. Yep. Can't really fault that. That's gone together quite nicely. Have they gone on the wrong side? I think the coupling hooks might have actually gone on the wrong side, so let's try that again. So yeah, I mean, already I've got a list of things that I can look at. The sort of looseness of the couplings is something to improve. But there we go, they've gone together properly that time, and that's pretty good. Let's push back and couple up to the other vans. There you are, successful coupling. So Helgen, if you're watching, I now know that it's not that difficult. These are not perfect couplings, but you know, they couple together all right. And on this end, there you go, look at that, 3D printed homemade couplings. Right, can my wagons do what some of Dapple's couldn't? Can these get around the layout in a train without derailing? I'll be embarrassed if not, and I'll be pretty proud if so. Let's try it. Here we go. Here we go. They're coming around the curves. Cool. It's looking good. Let's try this bit at the top of Gordon's Hill. I don't know why, but that's the awkward part for some reason. Here we go. Yeah, nothing to it. So there you go. So now, when I complain that wagons and things derail, and people ask me, well, could you do better? I can say yes, very, very easily. But yeah, that's crazy. They are working absolutely fine. Let's keep going. Let's have a few more laps, just to make sure there are no issues. So yeah, I mean, the couplings are a bit floppy. I need to fix that, but there's nothing too detrimental, is there? They seem to be working absolutely fine. So to be honest, for a little beginner's project, this is a good start, isn't it? They seem to work well. To start with, when I was thinking about couplings, I was thinking about inventing my own type that would be easier, but I was brave and I decided, you know what, I'm just going to try and do an M solution, and it worked. I just thought, you know, it's too complicated for me, it's too complicated, but it wasn't in the end. It's actually not too bad at all. So there you have it, they are working nicely. So, any manufacturer that's having trouble getting wagons to stay on the track, give me a call. I'll give you some design tips. I'm only joking, by the way. I should always point out when I'm joking, because I say these things and people take it seriously and I look like an obnoxious moron, but yeah. Wow. It really feels like I have learned so much in this past week. That is the best part of all of this. So I've got two sort of wagon designs, very, very basic ones, but I guess I'm starting to think now, what's next? Well, I'm quite happy with the chassis, so I'm thinking maybe it would be nice to try and design some more bodies. Like I say, Callum did send me some pictures of a tanker and also a brake van. A set of 4 would be really quite nice to have, wouldn't they? So 4 chassis with 4 bodies, all of them interchangeable, or you can glue them on if you like. That would be really, really fun to sort of show on the channel. Maybe I could make them, and if they work right, I could do a review, like half as a joke, half seriously. I could try and do an honest review of my own product and review it as though it were a professional model, try and get into the mindset of my reviewing mode, and see what I would criticise about these, and then I suppose moving on, see if I can address some of those criticisms and move them a little bit closer to a professionally made wagon. I'm not suggesting I'll ever reach that standard, probably never with a 3D printer, but I think just edging closer little by little, that is all I could ever ask for, isn't it really? And if I'm having fun along the way, which I absolutely am, then that's all good if you ask me. So there we go, that's the start of my adventure in 3D printing. I guess the message is, don't be frightened of 3D printing, because it's a lot to learn. It is quite a learning curve, but I was always very, very frightened of getting started, and actually buying the 3D printer, spending that money on it, that was the worst part. Once it arrived, the whole experience has been amazing. I can highly recommend the FlashForge Adventurer 3. That's what I chose, and I haven't really had any serious issues with it. You do sometimes get the odd issue in the print, and it's quite difficult to get the settings right sometimes, but overall it's not half as scary as I thought it was going to be. And the best part is messing about with this CAD software. I mean, SketchUp, it's quite limited in some ways, but it's so, so good for getting started because the bar isn't too high. It doesn't feel like you're completely overwhelmed with all of the features. There's quite a limited set of features in the program, which gives you the tools that you need to produce something good, but it doesn't give you too much so that you just feel like you're out of your depth and you give up. So I really like SketchUp. I think I'm going to keep using it, and it's free, so why not? Anyway, I've waffled far too much. You must be sick of the sound of my voice by now, so I'm going to shut up. I'm going to end the video, and if you liked this, and if you like the whole adventure of 3D printing, do comment down below, share the video, give it a like, because if I think that people like this type of video, I might make more, but only if people like it, because if you hate it and you don't want to see more, I'd be a fool to make more. So if you like it, make sure it's clear to me, and I will definitely do some more. For now though, thank you very, very much for joining me. I'm so excited about all this, and I will see you very soon. All right, cheers folks, take care.